Hello, and thanks for tuning in to the / podcast. This is your host, James Carmen. And before we get into this week's episode, I have some news to share. After a great run, my co-host Aaron has moved on to pursue new opportunities. While we will miss him around here, we are very grateful for his insight and the energy he brought to every episode. Never fear, though, you'll still get your same dose of interesting technology topics combined with groan-inducing dad jokes and the endearing banter you've come to expect. Like, what do you call an alligator in a vest? An investigator. And with that, on to the episode. Welcome to the / where we lean into the future of IT. I'm your host, James Carmen, and today we have with us Guy Royse. Guy works for Redis as a developer advocate, combining his decades of experience in writing software with a passion for learning and for sharing what he has learned. Guy explores interesting topics and spreads the knowledge he has gained around developer communities worldwide. Teaching and community have long been a focus for Guy. He runs his local JavaScript meetup in Ohio and has served on the selection committee for numerous conferences. He'll happily speak anywhere that will have him, and has even helped teach programming at a prison in central Ohio. We're going to have to talk about that. That sounds pretty cool.
It was cool, actually, yeah.
In his personal life, Guy is a hard-boiled geek, interested in role-playing games, science fiction, and technology. He also has a slightly less geeky interest in history and linguistics. It seems like a common thing for tech people. In his spare time, he likes to camp and studies history and linguistics. Guy lives in Ohio with his wife, 3 sons, and an entire wall of board and role-playing games. Fantastic. Well, welcome, Guy.
Well, thanks. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Happy to have you. I was really enjoyed our conversation the other day. We were preparing for this episode. The one thing, and I gotta get into this because there was something you brought up, and I don't know anything about this world. Usually, I know a little something about most things, enough to be dangerous, but I didn't know. So you said something about software-defined radio and aircraft tracking. I gotta learn more about this.
Absolutely. So, yeah, I'm into radio as well. So I have other nerdy hobbies beyond, beyond just software and role playing games. I'm also a ham radio. And if anyone sees a picture of me, I've got a big gray beard and long gray hair, and I totally don't look like the kind of guy that would be a ham radio guy. If you are a ham radio person, I'm Whiskey 8 Golf Uniform Yankee. So that's for the extra nerds out there. Well, software-defined radio is basically a radio. It's a little dongle. It's got a USB port on one side and an SMA antenna port on the other. You hook it up to an antenna, and then you can control it through libraries and sample the spectrum at a frequency range that the radio will operate on. A lot of the commercial ones you can get them on Amazon for like $35, and they'll usually do a range from like somewhere down below AM radio. So like a medium frequency, medium wave as they used to call it back in the day, all the way up through to about like 2.5 gigahertz or about around 2 gigahertz. And so you can then just sample that and then feed that data into whatever. And this is raw sampling. It's like sampling an audio file, except it's spectrum. And then there's a ton of software called software that interfaces with the device, which will then decode it. And so you can listen to like just broadcast radio if you want, which is a lot harder than just turning on a radio. Or you can sample different pieces of data that are floating around out there on the airwaves. There's lots of interesting data. One particularly interesting data is aircraft transponders. They're constantly broadcasting their heading, their location, their flight ID, their aircraft number, and you can pick that up and then consume that data. And I did a fun project where I consumed that data, put it in an event stream in Redis, and then used that to populate a bunch of JSON documents in Redis, and then created a GUI in front of that, a map that showed where all the radios are, or all the where all the aircraft are within that I've picked up from their transponders. I have a 25-foot mast on my house attached to my chimney. I do not have an HOA.
Of course not.
Otherwise, I would not have that at all. And from there, where my antenna's mounted, I can pick up aircraft down in northern Kentucky, in southern Michigan, all the way up near Cleveland, and I picked up stuff in the Indiana suburbs or Indianapolis suburbs.
Nice. So you can visualize where the planes are and
Yeah.
all that. That's cool.
Now,
All right.
obviously, you've got like a low-flying helicopter near Indianapolis. It's over the horizon. I'm not going to see it, but you've got some, Delta Airlines flight flying at 35,000 feet. Then I have line of sight because it's in the air, right?
Right.
um,
That's cool.
but yeah, and there's all kinds of cool data that you can pick up, like your water meters are putting out data, and so you could read it. You can. I think the most random one I think is the most fun is that you can read the tire pressure sensors of cars. Because the little pressure sensor, you can't wire it because it has to move, right?
Sure. Yeah.
And so you can use a little radio, and then when the pressure goes low, then the car says, "Oh, your tire's low," and you can intercept that and monitor that and do I don't know what with it, but it's kind of fun that you can see it. In fact, when these things first came out, if you parked next to someone else that had a low tire, your sensor would go out. If you had like the same sensors in your tires,
yeah. Oh my gosh.
So
That's funny.
so there's all this data flitting about, and the aircraft transponder is probably the most tangible data that anyone really can look at and understand and appreciate. But there's all sorts of data flitting about. Some of it's submitted by it's broadcast by amateur radio operators. Some of it is just IoT devices. Some of it's stuff like aircraft and watercraft, and you can. Yeah, there's all kinds of stuff being out there. I also read all my neighbors' water meters.
Hey, taking too many showers, Bill. You might want to cut down on that.
And I can't figure out who they are though. I just have numbers, right?
We just know. All right.
Although
So
I'm pretty sure the guy who has the really high usage every summer at the beginning of summer, probably the guy with the pool.
Yeah, with the pool, the nice green grass, that guy.
Yeah.
All right. So that is adequately geeky. I love it. Okay. You work for Redis now as a developer advocate. How did you get there? What was your path?
Everyone likes to think that I have a plan for their career.
As if.
I think everyone likes to tell people they had a plan for their career.
Sure.
And I did have a little bit of a plan in my career. I've always wanted to be a software nerd. I always liked computers. I always liked science fiction and stuff like that since I was a little kid. And when I was in elementary school, I read a little book called It's Basic, which taught you how to read, how to do line number basic, 20 print Guy, 20 go to 10, or 10 go print Guy, 20 go to 10 kind of stuff, right?
Oh yeah.
And I read that, and I'm like, oh, I understand. Like it clicked for me what programming was, and I'm like, this is easy. It was my, obviously, a lot to learn.
You had it all figured out by then.
Yeah, but the concept of it clicked immediately.
Yeah,
and you just give it a series of instructions. They just have to be really structured. And so 5th grade me figured this out, and I decided then that I was going to be a computer programmer when I grew up, and then I pursued it deliberately. So to that extent, I had a plan, right? And then I took things in school to facilitate that. And then early in my career, I ran into a lot of people who were later in their career, and they all regretted getting out of the technology. And so I decided I'm going to stay as an individual contributor. I'm going to stay coding and not make that mistake of going into management and then wishing I could, and pining for the days of old when back when I used to code and life was simpler. Now, in hindsight, now that I'm in my 50s, I can look at that and it's like, well, that's a little bit of nostalgia that they were experiencing there. But I made a decision to stay an individual contributor, and that's what I've done my entire career. I've worked at various consulting companies, enterprises, lots of stuff over the years. About 10, 15 years ago, I started getting into public speaking as part of I got enamored with like the conference scene and the meetup scene. And I started speaking, and I found that I really liked it, and I had a knack for it. And so I was just doing that as part of my consulting job, just on the side. I'd speak at a conference when they'd let me, and I would go to meetups, and then I started running the Columbus JavaScript meetup. And at some point, someone reached out to me and said, "Hey, would you be interested in a role as a developer advocate at a startup here in Columbus?" And so I wasn't pursuing this job. It didn't occur to me that I should do it. And I got this opportunity. And apparently what the CEO, it was a little startup with like 15 people. What the CEO had done is he had gone into he'd found me online just looking around for a developer advocate for their company, went into their the room where, the war room where all 6 of their developers were coding, and asked, "Does anyone here know Guy Royse?" And 5 people raised their hand. And then I got the job.
That's a good sign.
Yeah. And from there, then I just continued on that path, and that company was bought by another company. And then I eventually ended up at Redis doing DevRel there. And that was actually the result of the man who, the gentleman that hired me. He had seen me give a talk at a conference. It was called Machine Learning for Gamers, Dungeon Forecasts and Dragon Regressions. And
Nice.
we'd been having this problem where a lot of developers didn't understand the kinds of problems they could solve with machine learning. And so it was just here's the kind of problems you can solve with machine learning. And I talked about like classification and regression and those sorts of things, and using Dungeons and Dragons examples. And so he reached out to me because he liked my talk and wanted to know if I wanted to work at Redis. And at the time I wasn't looking to make a move, but then, things lined up later, and we made it work. And so now I'm at Redis.
Fantastic. All right. Now we're going to have a real problem because you keep bringing up cool things that I want to dig into and talk about, but we have an agenda on our little thing that we need
Screw
to
the agenda.
Yeah, like now I want to hear about machine learning and Dungeons and Dragons, right? Now, all right. So Redis. Some people are familiar with Redis. I kind of just generally know it as, it's a cache, but is my understanding there flawed? Is it naive? Is it limited in what Redis really is?
So Redis, I always like to use the sort of elevator one-liner of Redis is a memory first NoSQL database.
Okay.
It's memory first because everything is stored in memory. Nothing is stored on disk. It can be stored on disk, but that's a configuration. And so because everything is in memory first and disk second, everything's in memory. So it's stupid fast, right? And of course, that would make a fantastic cache. And so lots of people use it for that. It's in fact its primary use case. Well, I like to joke that that's its secondary use case, because its primary use case is plastering over crappy architecture. But
That's fair. That's fair.
Which, fair enough, right? But so it's memory first, but it's also NoSQL, and so you're not, it's NoSQL's not the buzzword that it used to be, but it was a big buzzword back in the day. It's not a relational database; it's a key value store.
Okay.
And so everything in Redis is a key, and that key has a value in it, and that value could just be a string, like maybe the JSON from an API call that you want to cache to make that API faster or cheaper. Or that key could contain like a hash table, and then you can that's really good for like session management.
Sure.
Or that key could be a linked list, or it could be an event stream, or it could be a JSON document, or it could be a probabilistic data structure. So there's lots and lots of data structures you can store in here. So it's in memory, NoSQL. And then it's a database because it can persist things. It can be clustered, it can be scaled, and you can use it as a primary store for all your data. Now, most people don't. Most people just use it as a cache, or use it for pub sub, or use it for session ID. Those are the common use cases. But yeah, that's sort of a super brief introduction of what Redis is. You take all that, put a wire protocol in front of it, and that's what Redis is.
Okay. It's funny because I'm just kind of like laughing to myself here when you explained Redis as an in-memory, basically database, memory first, right? I remember, I think it was back in like the early 2000s. There was this guy, I don't even remember the guy's name, but he was like from South America. And this was he was like, we can do databases fully in memory. Memory's cheap. And, it was starting to come down where memory was actually cheap. And this guy was advocating for this whole notion of like, we just have an in-memory database. Yeah, we'll persist it on the side, but like fundamentally, this thing's in memory and it's lightning fast, and we can do this. We can actually have an complete in-memory database. And it was blowing people's minds. And they were, but when you said it just now, I didn't even blink an eye. Like, yeah, of course, that's what it is. It was so funny how controversial that was back then. And everybody's like, what are you, crazy? What is this black magic you're speaking?
Well, in some ways, it still is a little controversial because, most people do use Redis as a cache. And so if I come out and say, hey, you can use a database, it's like, yeah, but I'm going to pull the power out and it's all gone, right? And it does feel that way.
Right.
But it totally can work. We have customers to do that. I mean, honestly, the bulk of our use case is caching.
Gotcha.
But I remember actually in the early 2000s reading about this product. I was at Nationwide at the time. It was called Prevailer. And it was like this object serialization thing where you would just constantly write to these object serializations, and it would persist it all to disk when the process shut down. And then when it spun back up, it would just keep the state in memory all the time.
Mm-hmm.
I think the mistake, because RAM was getting cheap, but at the time, it still wasn't like your computers didn't have as much RAM as they do now.
Right. Wasn't web scale cheap.
Yeah. That's kind of where I'm getting is it was sort of naive in the sense of how much data you actually would want to store once disk and flash got cheap enough and large enough.
Right.
It's like, no, we want to record the entire click stream of each user that hits our website and keep it for 6 months or whatever, right? Yeah, that's a lot of RAM.
Absolutely. And it wasn't, those numbers weren't that big back then. But yeah, you're right.
Whereas back then it was like, hey, we got 300 people in a call center and we have an application for them and we need to keep track of who they're calling today. Okay, yeah, you can keep all that in RAM. That'd be easy, right?
That would work, yeah. Okay, so Redis is fun. Primarily people use it for a cache. But working for Redis, I'm sure like you've come across clients, when clients will find a way to use things in weird ways that the authors don't intend. Has there been anything that ever came up, in your travels and speaking with people who use, or customers, I guess you would say, anything like that jumps out at you?
That's a really good question. I'm trying to think of any really interesting examples of people that have sort of misused Redis or used it in an unexpected way. I know some stupid Redis tricks, to paraphrase David Letterman's stupid human tricks thing that he used to do.
Nice.
Like you can use sorted sets to add numbers together and stuff like that. Which is, it's a trick, but no one does it in production, right? It's just, yeah, I'm actually struggling with a good answer for this because the vast majority of people are using it as a cache. PubSub's a popular option. I remember one guy used PubSub. This is when the pandemic had just started, and he had built an online deck of cards, so you could like play euchre or something like that online.
Oh, cool.
I'm sorry. For those who aren't from Ohio, euchre is a card game that's popular in the Midwest. Look it up; it's a lot of fun.
Or Michigan, apparently. I didn't know Michiganders love euchre
they do as well.
But they do crazy scoring. They did just two fives, which, come on.
Yeah, it's got to be 4 and 6. Come on,
4 and 6.
Yeah,
all the way.
But he had built this thing, and he was using Redis PubSub to do it, and he was running into scaling issues because PubSub has when it starts clustering, it creates too much chatter on the cluster, and he's starting to run into issues with it. There was one user that's like, they were getting upset because they were running out of connections to Redis, so they couldn't get any more connections to Redis because Redis is just a TCP socket, right?
Sure.
And they were upset that they had hit 65,535 connections and couldn't add anymore on one server. It's like, well, that's not Redis's fault.
Okay, I got to know, like, was this like direct connect from mobile phones, or like what was going on here?
I don't remember. I just know that I don't know if they were like pooling them or they were just trying to, yeah, maybe. That seems crazy.
That is a lot.
Because I do a lot of JavaScript stuff. I do a lot of Node, and Redis is single threaded in the back end, and Node is single threaded, and so generally I don't have more than one connection open at a time ever, because not more than one thing's ever going to happen.
Right, you don't need to.
And if I need to do something in an isolated fashion, I might create a separate connection for that purpose. But generally, so you never have more than a single node process is never going to have maybe 2-3 tops connections open. So
that's weird. 65,000.
Yeah, 64K. Yeah.
Wow.
And what was really funny about that is they didn't realize that's a restriction of Linux.
Right. Yeah.
That was the funniest part about it. And it's like, well, let me explain something to you, and I'm going to do this as delicately as possible.
There's a thing called file descriptors.
Yeah.
And all right. Everybody, of course, in all the product companies in the world, everybody has their flavor of AI. So I don't really think of, when I think of AI and Redis wouldn't come to mind as like a thing that could be, leverage AI. So, but there is a use case so that they are supporting AI in a certain way. What's going on over at Redis with respect to AI?
Yeah. So I actually, in some ways, I wouldn't say that Redis is doing AI, strictly speaking. We are doing. We've added a vector type to Redis,
Okay.
and so it can be a vector database. There's a lot of vector specific databases out there that they're all about just working with vectors and nothing else. And a lot of the database vendors, including Redis, are adding a vector type and then allowing you to search on a vector as well. The vector, I mean, is generally you would create an embedding using an AI model to then and store that as a vector, and then you would just see how similar the vectors are. But the AI has kind of already happened.
Right. Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
the model has done its thing. You've given it an image, it's turned it into a pile of numbers, and you put that pile of numbers into Redis, and then you do a query, and that query gets turned into a pile of numbers, and then Redis just looks at the two piles of numbers and says, which are how similar. Find the pile of numbers most similar to the one that you gave me. And
Okay.
that's a very simplistic way of explaining vector search.
But I would imagine since it's memory first, it's pretty doggone fast, I would guess, right? I mean,
Yeah, it is. We actually did a benchmark, and by we I mean other people on the team,
yeah.
not me, um, against a lot of the popular databases and some of the vector specific and the non-vector specific. And I mean, it's a benchmark, so right.
Mm-hmm.
There's I haven't looked at the details, so I don't know that this has happened, but benchmarks often are a little selective about what they show. Shocking, I know. This is me being a developer and being honest, right?
What?
All the qualifications, because my boss will probably be listening, right?
Okay, yeah.
But I mean, we kind of smoked everyone, honestly. The numbers were extraordinary.
Wow.
We
Okay.
did a vector set with 100 billion vectors.
Wow.
Yeah, right.
That's a lot. Okay.
Yeah, that's a ton.
Yeah.
And then our numbers well exceeded all of our competitors. So that's in some ways I think that's one reason to use like Redis as a vector database and do the AI thing with it. I mean, some of it is just most people have it already.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. It's already there.
And so if you're like at a big enterprise, you don't have to go in and say, well, we got to go through the process to get a new piece of software into the company, and 6 months later, and
Oh, okay.
So
I like that.
Yeah,
That's good to keep in mind.
and this is
You have to
actually why
get
a
their
lot of the
approvals.
database vendors are also doing the same thing, because it's the
Sure.
same story for them, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
I won't mention any names, but
So is it like you just need a newer release of Redis, and it's going to have that kind of baked in from the factory, all turned on, ready to go if you just want to use it? Okay.
Redis 8's coming out here in just a couple weeks.
Okay.
It may actually be out by the time this goes live.
Okay.
Not sure of our exact release date, but it'll be here in a couple weeks. And there's a couple milestones you can play with now, releases that you can play with if you want to kick the tires on it now. And they've added the vector search and a ton of capabilities, actually.
Okay. I'll have to check that out. We're doing an internal project where we're doing, as a consulting company, we have a lot of content, thought leadership content, blogs. Yeah. Well, this podcast is one of them. And, just indexing all of our content and making, being able to ask a chatbot, hey, what content do we have related to, Redis in this podcast episode? So that might be something, maybe we check out Redis, because right now we're using, another vendor for that. Yeah. One that's just a normal database with vector things turned on inside it. I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. But yeah, that's cool. I'll have to check that out. I did not realize that.
I mean, the whole vector stuff is a ton of fun.
Mm-hmm.
It's really interesting, and it's actually way easier than developers think it is. I mean, the algorithms to create the indices and to search these things are, black arts computer science stuff that I don't really look into that often, and I don't really know how it works at the lowest level. But the actual comparison is actually remarkably intuitive. You just have to think of the pile of numbers as coordinates, and then it's literally draw a line to the next thing, which one's closest.
Yeah.
Or take the angle from origin to the two things, and which one has the narrowest angle. It's those sorts of comparisons. It's geometry. I mean, it's geometry in 512 dimensions. But
yeah.
Which sounds hard, but it's not hard for a computer to do.
No, yeah. I mean, if you can visualize it in 2 dimensions and then just kind of extrapolate it
Yeah.
in your brain, it makes sense. I mean, the stuff we learned in linear algebra.
Yeah. Well, that's what a lot of it is,
Absolutely. You mentioned you're in Columbus,
Yeah, yeah.
Ohio, near Ohio State. And I'm down here in Cincinnati, Ohio. Actually, I live across the river in northern Kentucky. You mentioned that earlier.
Yeah.
That you could see planes down here. Where
Yep. Yes, I can.
the Cincinnati, Ohio airport is actually in Kentucky. So you're seeing planes probably in Kentucky.
Yeah, out of Covington. Yeah.
Out of yes, exactly.
I've actually flown into the airport once.
Just once. Well,
Just
I
once.
guess
Well, I mean,
you
I've
live in
always flown in and out
Columbus.
of Columbus, right?
Yeah.
But it was just, I remember it's just a story. I'm going to tell it.
That's fine.
I was coming back from a conference in Florida. It was Orlando Code Camp, actually, which I'm going to in 2 weeks, and which is always over spring break. So the flights are always just a total mess. My flight got canceled and they wanted to rebook me, but there aren't any seats on anything. And so they're like, well, we'll take you from Orlando to Atlanta, Atlanta to Boston, Boston to Columbus. It's these kind of crazy flights.
Oh
I'm
my
like, I'm not
goodness.
doing that. Right.
Yeah, that's
And
crazy.
so I find a flight direct with a seat available to Cincinnati. I'm like, I'll do that.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'll just rent a car one way or take an Uber or something. Right. The problem was it left in 12 hours. And so I had to spend 12 hours at the airport.
Oh, that's fun.
But I could spend 12 hours at the airport or spend 12 hours flying all over the East Coast to get back to Ohio. And so the airport's more comfortable.
Sure, absolutely. Oh, you don't like airplane seats?
And
So comfortable.
I'm kind of fat.
Yeah,
So-
airplanes. I don't think it matters who you are; they're just not comfortable.
Yeah, they're not comfortable in general, but everyone wants more leg room, and I don't really need more leg room. I need more ass room, right?
Yeah, gotcha.
So you do what you do, right?
Mhm.
So I ended up spending the day in the airport. I remember working on a bunch of WebAssembly stuff because I was playing with WebAssembly at the time. So I land into Covington. I get out. I'm like, okay, this is slightly weird because I'm in Ohio, but I'm not in Ohio.
Right.
And I'm almost home, but I'm not. And then I go to the rental car place and then do the math and say, I'm pricing an Uber right now. Can you beat it? And then for a one-way car, and then they did. And so I drove home. That was my one time in Covington. It was actually, the awful thing is that I then proceeded to drive home after being in an airport all day. And then, taking about a 2-hour flight direct. And then I'm heading up 71 and Waze is telling me to get off on some country road and go around. I'm like, nah, that's stupid. I'm not doing that. And well, it turns out it was smarter than me, as these things always are.
Mhm.
And there was some sort of accident and the traffic was backed up for miles. And I was just sitting in a parking lot in the middle, like between two cornfields.
Oh my goodness.
And I'm like, it's like 9 p.m. at night. I'm halfway home. I'm like, I'm just exhausted. I want to go to bed. I'm just sitting in a rental car, which I then had to proceed to return the next morning. So
That drive is so
yeah,
boring.
that was my one experience out of Covington. Yeah.
Yeah. So it doesn't sound like that was a fun experience.
Yeah, the airport was fine.
So you're in Columbus. There's kind of a cool tech scene up there. I mean, that's one of our markets that we operate in as well. And there's a lot of and you're a part of that local tech scene up there. So tell us a little bit about the the Ohio tech scene in general, I guess.
Yeah, it's it's sort of like a regional pride thing, right?
Mm-hmm. Sure.
I feel like Ohio is sort of underappreciated in some ways when it comes to technology. Like a lot of my career, you've probably experienced this too. Is there's sort of a coastal bias, right?
Oh, sure.
And Ohio's flyover country, even though we've got like 12 million people here. It's
Yeah.
and Cleveland, Columbus, and Cincinnati are all like over 2 millions in the metro area, and then you add in like Dayton and Toledo and Akron, and there's a lot of people here.
Mm-hmm.
And there's actually a surprisingly strong tech scene particularly between Cincinnati and Columbus.
Mm-hmm.
Cleveland has a tech scene, but I don't find as many meetups up there and stuff.
Right.
I remember several years ago, someone was doing a startup up in Cleveland. They said, yeah, whenever startups in Cleveland get a round of funding, they move to Columbus. Mm-hmm. Sorry, Cleveland.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's kind of surprising. Like I was at a conference in Lithuania, and we had 3 speakers, myself included, that were from Columbus.
Wow.
In Lithuania, and there were only like maybe 5 Americans at the entire conference amongst all the speakers, and 3 of them were from Columbus. And I run into this. There's maybe it's that astronaut thing where everyone jokes it's something about Ohio makes everyone want to leave the earth, right? And maybe something about Ohio makes everyone want to leave and go to foreign countries and give talks. I don't know.
Yeah. Okay, I can see
that. But yeah, there's actually a really healthy tech scene here. It's not that sort of high tech scene. Like it's not generally those sorts of startups.
Mm-hmm.
It tends to be more. It's more business, right? In the sense of like I remember the first time I went to San Francisco and I went to meet up and everyone talked about where they worked.
Mm-hmm.
And it was all, it's like, oh, I work for Google, I work for Netflix, I work for, there's a bunch of tech companies. And then but I'm like, well, when we do meetups in Columbus and we ask where we work, it's like, oh, I work at Nationwide, or I work at Huntington, or I work at L Brands, or the Gap, things like that. It tends to be all of our, and I'm sure you know what I'm talking about here too, because I mean, Liberty is, who are your customers? Well, there are a lot of these enterprises. It's probably like Kroger. I don't know who your customer list is. I'm making stuff up, but it's Kroger, Procter and Gamble, maybe down in Louisville, you're dealing with Humana, that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's really concrete stuff
Right.
that's, and when I worked for Pillar, we had clients like AEP, and we did a lot of work in Iowa as well. And it was like John Deere and stuff like
Yeah.
that. I don't know if actually I probably wasn't allowed to say that, but too bad.
We can edit it out.
John Deere was always kind of funny about their being offered as a client, but it's been a lot of years, and Pillar was acquired by Accenture, so it probably doesn't matter. But yeah, there's just really tangible companies, like it's food, auto,
Mm-hmm.
insurance, banking. And a lot of the tech companies on the West Coast tend to be more ephemeral. Like if Netflix went away, I mean, a lot of people would be sad,
Right.
but no one would starve.
Correct. Yeah.
And so, but Ohio's got a lot of companies like that. It's that sort of fundamental things that everyone needs. But at the same time, there's just a lot of really talented developers in the area, and I mean, there's data centers here. There's, I think some of it might just be the universities.
Mm-hmm.
Some of it, I have this theory, actually, some of it is that it's a choke point geographically.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So, because you got to go around Canada, Ohio is like the lowest northern state.
Right.
And so all the wires physically have to go around the Great Lakes, and all the freeways have to go around the Great Lakes, and all the railroads have to go along the Great Lakes. And so that creates a little cluster here in Ohio.
That's a good point.
And because all the data is flowing through here, and half the United States is east of the Mississippi, and so it's a good call center, and it becomes a cluster for business. And then where there's business, there's software, and where there's software, there's nerds. And so there's a lot of good nerds here.
Yeah, a lot of nerds, and I think, like, isn't there, what is it? Intel is building a big thing up in Columbus area. Is that right?
Yeah, I'm hoping that'll increase the value of my house so that I can sell it and move out.
Sell to one of those Intel millionaires, right?
It's actually not terrible. I'm in Westerville on the northeast side, and they're building that out in New Albany. Last I heard, so there's some scuttlebutt about maybe that won't happen because Intel had that thing that happened that I didn't honestly pay that close of attention to in the news, but they had like a defect in the chips.
Yeah.
And so I don't know, and I know their stock dropped after that. I bought, but
yeah, why not?
I'm a bad news buyer. but that's still, it hasn't been canceled yet, so we'll see what happens. But there was enough interest to say we should invest a lot of money here. So yeah, it's Ohio's a pretty good place. I'll take a little bit of civic pride here and say I think Columbus is the best out of the three, of course.
So how is your pro football team?
Yeah.
How do they do?
Yeah.
I can't really throw many stones because the Bengals.
Well, I actually grew up in Northern Ohio.
Yeah.
And so I moved to Columbus, and I'm like, why does everyone care about college football?
Yeah.
And then because I just grew up watching the Browns lose.
Yeah. Sure. Exactly.
And so I just never really developed much care for football at all. And I moved here, and I remember I worked at a hardware store in college, and they had me work the day of the Ohio State Michigan game. And I'm in there, and I'm like, Saturday in a hardware store is like busy, right?
Sure.
And I'm in there, and I'm like, where is everyone? it was just empty. It was so weird.
Ghost town.
And I'm like, it's the Ohio State Michigan game. I'm like, what's that? Because I just didn't know. I've never really been a sports person, honestly, but I did watch the Browns when I was a kid with my dad, but they lost a lot.
So did the Bengals. So
yeah.
Very cool.
But,
nice.
But yeah. So I think Ohio's a cool place. I mean, what I meant to say actually for everyone is now considering moving to Ohio is Ohio's terrible. And you should totally stay where you're at.
Well, you mentioned something the other day about like some of the like tech conferences. Like we've actually got 3 pretty good size, pretty well known, because you're in the conference, speaking circuit and everything. So we've got 3 pretty good size conferences here in Ohio. With it like Stir Trek and what are the
there's Stir Trek, which is here in Columbus. It's a 1-day event.
Mm-hmm.
This year it's on May 2nd. It's their shtick is that you get a lot of really deep technical talks, and then you watch a nerdy Marvel-ish superhero kind of movie afterwards, and eat popcorn and go home. And it's a good time. There's down in Cincinnati, there's Momentum, which has been growing quite steadily over the years. It's usually at the Hollywood Casino there.
Mm-hmm.
Is it Hollywood Casino? Or no, the Hard Rock Casino. Yeah.
Hard Rock, yeah.
Yeah. It shows you how much I gamble.
Yeah.
I just buy Intel stock. Yeah.
When you hear bad news.
Yeah. But yeah, it's a great event. I've spoken at it many times. A guy named Mike Richardson runs it, and he does a fantastic job. It's not just him; there's a crew, but he's sort of the spearhead of it.
Yeah, but he works over at Kroger.
Yeah, he does. Yeah,
good dude.
Dude. He's a really good dude. And then probably the really big one that's here in Ohio is Code Mash, which is up in Sandusky. And at its peak before the pandemic, it was about 3,500 people attended. And it's in Sandusky. And I was like, oh, why are you doing an event in Sandusky? I remember I got that from one of my bosses initially. Sandusky? Where the hell's that?
Yeah, what's that all about?
It's like, wait, haven't you seen Tommy Boy?
Yeah, Callahan Auto Parts. What are you talking about?
Exactly, right. Yeah. But it draws people from Chicago and Detroit and Cleveland and Columbus and Cincinnati and Indianapolis and Louisville and Pittsburgh, and it just draws all these people into this area. And it's in January on Lake Erie. People there really want to learn, right?
But don't they do it at like what is it? Is it Kalahari?
Yeah,
They do it at the Kalahari, which is one of those like indoor water park places. For me, that just didn't seem like, because I mean, I've been in the tech industry for a while. I don't know that I want to see a bunch of tech geeks in their bathing suit, at a Kalahari water park. I don't know. That just doesn't seem like that's
yeah. So it's always a little awkward, but I get in the hot tub anyhow, and I'm like, well, we're all in the same boat.
We're kind of an odd bunch, us software engineers.
Well, the hot tubs have the swim up bar, and so a few beers in, you don't care.
Oh yeah, there you go. No problem. All right, very cool. Yeah, I've loved the tech scene here in Cincinnati. We've got a pretty a lot of meetups and that sort of stuff, and I know Columbus is big. So it's cool. Yeah, I know you had some thoughts about the scene.
Well, it's I'm from Ohio. I don't know if you're from Ohio originally, but I was born and raised here, and I've never moved out. I moved to Columbus to go to school and stayed in the metro area, and I don't really see any reason why I would ever want to leave. It's Ohio's got really like a really diverse economy. I mean, we got a good agricultural sector. You've got like here down in Cincinnati, you got a lot of shipping on the Ohio River. You've got distributors. We have a lot of distributors up here in Columbus as well. There's still a fair bit of manufacturing, and there is a movement for manufacturing onshoring or reshoring.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Ohio is very in a good position to take care of. We've got good resource extraction. There's like natural gas resources, and most of the coal is gone, but but that's just across the river in West Virginia. But it's got everything you need for making steel and all that kind of stuff. And so these are dirty industries, but they don't have to be. You can clean them up.
Sure.
And but there's just a lot going on here. And then we've got all these universities. It's just sort of like a little microcosm of America.
Yeah, absolutely. We something for everybody in Ohio, that's for sure. And I was born here, but I claim to be a Floridian. I grew up in Ocala, Florida, so that's kind of where I, but the majority of my life's been here in Ohio. All right, you mentioned Pillar, and I do remember Pillar. They were actually a fantastic company. I think Calibrity and Pillar would have a lot in common if Pillar was still around today, for
Yeah.
sure. Very very heavy in on the craft angle. So yeah, it was a fantastic company. We would be kindred spirits companies. So yeah, I'm sure you've been involved in the big buzzword, the agile transformations and stuff.
Yeah.
Working at Pillar, how was your experience with those?
It was a mixed bag, honestly.
Hmm.
I mean, you could do a lot in the micro, but it was hard to do things in the macro.
Okay.
Um, so if we went to like smaller or medium sized companies with a transformation, we'd be very successful,
Hmm.
and the entire organization would go along and buy in, and then they would start delivering software at a greater cadence and would spend less time, waste less time on things they didn't really need,
Hmm.
and you get that. Well, that agility. There's a
Hey
reason we
man.
called it that, right?
Hey, what the heck?
um, so that it's like, well, but next week our business requirements are different. That's fine.
Yeah.
you know we can adapt to that because we're delivering just releases every 2 weeks, and we're delivering features continuously, and you can change your mind. That's one of the big powers. That's one of the superpowers you get with agile.
Yeah.
In larger organizations it was a struggle, because if you go into like a large insurance company or a large healthcare company, I don't want to name names. uh,
Yeah.
uh, they're just big enough that you're never going to be able to transform the whole organization. uh, you know that has to come down from like the CEO, and it needs to be a
Right.
mandate coming all the way down, and they at companies that are that large just have a lot of other things that they're worried about over
Right.
that.
Yeah. I
I think some of
agree.
it honestly is just the economies of scale that you get when you're that big can cover all sorts of sins. And
Mm.
so the
We're really good at covering up sins. We've got that
yeah,
at scale. Yeah.
and so it's not actually the most important thing for them to focus on optimizing.
Right.
um, it's like, well, if I spend all this time optimizing this, like, yeah, I could get my cost down, but then that comes at the opportunity cost of other things that we could do.
Right.
So I'm not even like criticizing them. It's like it is probably the right business decision.
Sure.
Uh,
Absolutely.
but within an organization, you can make teams and small organizations within it. We had success there. Sometimes what I would see happen, honestly, is I'd get a lot of people that were on board with the idea, but then they would be frustrated by their employer, and then they'd go get other jobs.
So you train them up and say, "Hey, you're now this
Yeah,
this
yeah,
agilista, and oh, thanks for that. Now I'm going to go
yeah.
find another job. Oh,
That,
great.
that wasn't the intention, of course,
Well,
but
right. Right.
yeah, yeah, and I do see them at like in the meetups and stuff here in Columbus still, and some of them are still at the customers, and some aren't, you know. But yeah, that did happen occasionally.
Yeah, I think
Um,
it's when it comes to like the big organization, even within big organizations, trying to do that top down thing is it's just hard because the to see the payoff, to see the results, and that success, and get that little bit of momentum going. It's hard because you're trying to do it all at once. We found even in the big organizations, kind of that grassroots, and getting one little group going, and getting some buzz going around it, and get people to a little bit of success right going on. They're like, "Wait, what's going on over there?" Like, "Oh, they're doing an agile transformation." And that seems to be more effective of a means of actually getting the organization to transform.
yeah, that's where, I mean, we have more success from the bottom up in large organizations. Um, One thing that I always, I always kind of was just baffled why people would struggle against an agile methodology. Now, agile's become a little bit of a bad word, and it's
Hmm.
got some dysfunction in it. But there's like one key thing that I think that most people have adopted that has come out of agile, even if they don't realize it, is that it used to be you'd have a big upfront plan,
Hmm.
and this is the scope, and you're all going to deliver it on this date, right?
Correct. Sure.
And then of course everyone knew that that wasn't going to happen, but everyone pretended like it would. Um, and if I think about how I do things in my personal life, that's not how I manage anything in my personal life. I don't have a big project plan that says, okay, well, this is what I'm going to do, and then at this point I'm going to be this thing. I have a to-do list, and I
Yeah.
just work my
So.
to-do list.
Hmm.
And then occasionally I'll learn that, hey, actually this thing doesn't matter anymore. And I learned something new, and I need to add two more things that are more important than this thing here. And so that gets pushed down. And so I'm just bouncing things around my to-do list and removing things and
Hmm.
putting things off to later because it's not as important as something that's more urgent. That's all agile is.
Right.
And I've seen a lot of companies actually sort of embrace that aspect of it. Like everyone's using Jira,
Right.
and so they're all working very task oriented and to-do list oriented as opposed to big upfront plan oriented. And so there's lots of other things that come along with an agile transformation, I think, that are important. Like if you don't have some of the engineering practices, then you still run into that problem where I've got a big ball of mud for some software and my rate of change of that software slows down because I didn't test drive it or I don't have a unit test over anything.
Right.
That sort of stuff.
Sure.
But companies vary in how well they do that. But I think the idea of just breaking everything out into tasks and working the list is something that most companies are doing. And they're more amenable to changing that list midstream. And not everywhere, not consistently. Maybe your mileage varies here, but I think this is the one thing that everyone kind of learned from Agile, even though it's in some ways companies are there's sort of a pushback against it.
Right. Oh yeah.
Because people do the ceremony without realizing why it works.
Right.
And then it just becomes a ritual as opposed to, it's like, well, we have stand-up meetings every day. Why? Well, because we do.
Because that's what we do. We did it yesterday and the day before, so we have to do it today.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, that's absolutely been our experience as well. And it's interesting. We had a guest on a few weeks back, a few episodes back, and she was talking about, she had a conference talk that she did about like stop saying agile, because it's gotten to the point, like you said, it's almost like a dirty word in our industry. But as you pointed out, we're not going back to waterfall, right? Like we know that doesn't work.
Yeah.
we've fundamentally proven that just does not work, and it's just incompatible with building software and just the world, right?
Well, you're sacrificing. What are you sacrificing when you go to Agile from waterfall? You're sacrificing the illusion of certainty,
right,
to get more performance.
I have
get more efficiency out of your team, right?
That like waterfall is particularly bad for software engineering because a lot of people who are good at software engineering, because you need that flow state, that heavy concentration, being able to get into a task and just latch onto it. A lot of folks that have like ADHD, right?
Yeah.
Where they, normally you can't focus on anything, but you can do that hyper focus. So a lot of us software engineers actually are, a lot of them are ADHD. And one thing about ADHD folks, it's like almost like a driver for them is to wait until that last minute, that procrastination thing. So if you do a big upfront design and you say, okay, we're going to finish this next, in 18 months, well, guess when they're going to start on it? You know what I mean?
Because it's like you look at that, you're like, well, that sounds like a problem for Future Guy.
Yeah, exactly.
And what has Future Guy ever done for me? Literally nothing.
Yeah, he's someone else. Yeah, I just, and even outside of that, it just has never proven to be an effective way to do it, because everything changes like crazy. Because you can, right? With software, you can change it while the thing's running.
We used to. At one point, we coined the term. So when you apply waterfall practices to your Agile teams, we would call that waterboarding.
That's a good one. I've never heard that. I've heard like Agile fall and Wagile and all that, but I've never heard waterboarding. I think I like that.
It's a way better joke.
Yeah, I like that a lot. That works. That's if that's open for me to use,
please do. I stole it from someone else.
I'll give credit.
Like all good jokes, they're stored and forwarded.
Yeah, that is fantastic. All right. Now with Pillar back in the day, like when they weren't small, but they were smaller. They weren't like a big box kind of a shop or whatever. So, what was your experience when you work with some of the the clients that maybe they had worked with a big box firm and you go to engage with them? How was your experience there with, how receptive were they to the more lean and mean kind of style of like a Pillar?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I think a lot, this is probably a brag for the people I worked with, which I think is fine. It's a compliment for everyone I worked with at Pillar. Sure. Is I think that a lot of them were surprised to just the amount of talent Pillar was able to attract. Mm-hmm. Like a lot of the really good developers were at Pillar. They let me be there because I talked really good. And and because I had a beard. I actually literally had someone one time I was working on a project, and they're like, "We should listen to the guy with the beard. He probably knows something." Because my beard, it conveys intelligence. I don't know, but regardless, I literally, people have said this. They give me credit that I don't deserve, just because I have a beard and I look like a wizard.
It's like the Gandalf effect. Yeah.
Yeah, I call it the wizened geek, actually.
Oh, I like
Yeah.
that.
I get on stage and I'm, programming's kind of magical, and then it's sort of like the wise old man archetype, and but sorry, I started talking about myself. I was meaning to talk about how good the people at Pillar were.
But it was self-deprecation, so yeah,
it was.
Yeah.
But yeah, so a lot of it was just, I think they were impressed with the quality of the people that we could bring to the table. We tried to sell projects, not individuals. We didn't want to do staff augmentation,
Right?
Because that's, I mean, if you're trying to transform companies, staff augmentation is not how you do that. Right? You don't send one person to be inundated with the culture of the company and just sit there and take those slings and arrows, week after week. Right? That's a recipe for burnout, and you lose an employee. And so we tend to do teams. Most of my experience with the big box consultancies was when I worked at Nationwide, more than anything. And because we would bring in like IBM Global Services and big companies like that. Sure. And they had a lot, actually. And we had Microsoft with professional services there for a while too. And there's a lot of great people. I mean, I think they were overpriced, honestly, but but I mean, they were talented, and some of the people from Microsoft are really, really good. Microsoft hires smart people.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
But it is kind of funny in a way that Pillar did end up getting purchased and acquired by a big box consulting company, because they were. I had gotten recruited into developer relations before this happened, but they got acquired by Accenture, which it was kind of came out of nowhere, and a lot of the people that worked at Pillar weren't very happy with that outcome, because it's you go to somewhere where it's very agile, and then you get something a little more process oriented.
Right.
One of the quotes, and not to disparage Accenture terribly, but one of the quotes from someone was they posted a meme with Anakin and Obi-Wan saying, "You became the very thing we swore to destroy."
Yeah.
Which is maybe a little harsh, but I can certainly appreciate why they posted it. Yeah, I know for a lot of people that was a difficult transition. Some of the people are still there, actually. They're still with Accenture and enjoying themselves and working on projects in the region, and others have moved on to other things. And
yeah, I think one of the things we experience, and again, not to disparage companies like Accenture, of course, right? They're a great company and they do great work. But where we kind of, when we come into an organization that might have engaged with one of the bigger box kind of companies, it's kind of a refreshing change for them to really have like the geeks getting down and dirty and actually building software and getting things done. And so that's it's kind of a fun experience for when we engage with those companies. There's a place for the strategy and all of the things that you get from the big box type of folks for the price tag, but at a certain point you got to put away the PowerPoints and actually open up your IDE and start creating the actual software. So that can be a refreshing change for some of our clients. All right. Fantastic, man. This has been really cool, deep diving a lot of really interesting topics. I never knew there was a thing for software radio.
It's good fun. It is really cool. A ton of fun.
All right, is there a GitHub for that?
Well, you need to get a hardware device first.
Well, $35 at Amazon.
Yeah. I recommend there's a little kit for $45 that includes some antennas and stuff like that. I CodeMash, I did a workshop using that, which of course featured Redis, because of course that's my job, right?
That's fair.
I call it plucking data from thin air with software-defined radio. I think that's the name of it.
So, like when they founded Redis, it feels like that it's almost like designed for this, right? Like that was exactly what they made it for, right? That's how you're.
That's totally
that's
how
your talk came to be. Yeah.
Actually, my angle with the talk, and I mean, to be totally fair, some of this is I have a hobby, and if I can incorporate that into Redis, then that's more fun, but I'm also more engaged, and then I get more excited, and then
Sure.
that comes through, right?
Absolutely.
And so there's value in doing that. But it actually is kind of a really good example, because a lot of Redis is like, I mean, putting everything in RAM
Hmm.
is going to be at a higher cost than putting stuff on disk, right? I
Hmm.
mean, memory is more expensive than disk.
Sure.
Now, Flash is getting to the price point where they're kind of meeting with slower RAM is kind of meeting with faster Flash, and the
Hmm.
price points are starting to merge a little bit.
Yep.
And so that's becoming less true. And so, it's getting to a price point where, RAM's getting cheap enough that it can compete.
Sure.
Um, but, actual spinning iron is always going to be cheaper.
Absolutely.
Um, and so, if your performance requirements, you don't need like lightning fast performance, then, you can just not, you don't necessarily need to use Redis as a database. The thing that one of the things we really excel at is this idea of real-time database.
Right.
So if you need it to be super fast, like even if you're just using it to cache like tables that are, you prefetch the cache, and it's like, well, here's my state drop downs here in Redis, and here's all my like billing codes, or, whatever sorts of drop down things you need to populate. That's low hanging fruit that you can put into Redis and get a lot of performance gains.
Hmm.
Um, but anything that needs to be real time, like gaming, like you want like video game ranking into gaming,
Right.
who you need, or just the communications in game. There's a lot of gaming scenarios here. Fraud detection is another popular one, where you want that to happen as fast as possible. You can't wait. You want to catch the fraud as it happens. Um, so Redis is great for those sorts of options because it's real time, because the speed is mission critical. Displaying aircraft tracking data is actually really on brand with that, because it's real time. I'm showing the aircraft as it, the signal comes through the aircraft at the speed of light, and then I pick it up and it goes in my computer and it's into Redis in milliseconds.
And the things are doing like 600 miles an hour or whatever in the
Yeah,
air. So yeah,
and
that's
so
yeah.
in fact, it's kind of funny because I'll look at my demo and see where the aircraft is at, and then I'll look at like FlightAware, and my aircraft is the one on my demo is showing the actual location of the aircraft, and FlightAware is lagging by a couple minutes.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
Wow.
so,
That's
so
big for aircraft. A couple of minutes. They can move in a
yeah,
couple of
this is
minutes.
actually
Yeah.
pretty significant.
Yeah.
Um, and so the radio stuff is very much a real time sort of use case.
I love it.
Yeah, so it fits better than I could have ever hoped. So
Well, I'm definitely gonna check it out for sure. I'm gonna have to check that out.
yeah, absolutely. Well, let me know if
All
you have any
right.
questions. I'll help you out.
Yeah, for sure. So let's do our next segment of what we do here on the forward slash. We call this ship it or skip it.
Ship or skip, everybody, we gotta tell us if you ship or skip.
All right. So the first one, we came up with a few based on our conversation the other day. We had a really interesting conversation. So what about like um it was kind of an interesting thing related to remote work, but related to time zones. So, what do you like? You're doing remote work. I'd say you're probably like a ship it on that. Tell us about your opinion when it comes to like the time zone, disparate time zones with teams. What do you think? Is that a ship it or is that a skip it?
If the time zones are far apart, skip it.
Okay.
You just can't coordinate. You end up in this vicious cycle where someone does a bunch of work all night, and then you look at it first thing in the morning, and then it's wrong, and then you tell them it's wrong, and they're like, okay, well, I'll do that tomorrow, and then and then you wait 24 hours to find out whether they did it right or not, and it actually just slows you down. Um, there's
Okay.
another skip it as well that I related to this, is the idea of everyone needs to be remote or everyone needs to be on site, but you don't have a mix.
Okay.
Because if you have, I ran into this where you'd have rooms of people with a phone link,
Hmm.
back when we would get in a conference room, and then, we didn't have TVs everywhere. We just had, the phone systems, and you'd literally watch the people in one room mute the phone, have a side conversation, and then unmute it and then say something, even though we were, quote, one team.
Sure. Yeah.
We weren't one team. We were two teams. And because the bandwidth of communication you had with that individual, metaphorically speaking, um, needs to be comparable for you to feel like you're all on even footing and are all on one team. And if there's a disparity there, then you just human psychology drives that to be two teams.
Sure.
So everyone's got to be. I'm totally down on remote. Ship it. I've been working remote for the last 5 years. Love it. I don't want to go back. Working with people that are very far away in time zones, skip it. And working, having sort of this hybrid remote, not remote, skip it.
I can't argue with any of that. I know at Caliberty when we do our, we'll have like these meetings where we do, kind of an all hands sort of a thing. And even though, I'm at the corporate headquarters and I'm doing a presentation or whatever, we might have people in a room. I will do my part from my desk so that it's, the experience is the same. Because if I'm in the room with a bunch of people and we're co-located, they'll ask a question and I'll answer it just directly instead of I'll forget. Oh, I forgot to answer. Re-ask the question, repeat the question to everybody. So, but I think it does make for a better experience when all the presenters are definitely going to treat basically everybody remotely. I think that evens, as you said, that kind of evens the playing field. So, I like it.
Now, the time zone thing is qualified by the working the same time zone, not being physically in the same time zone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I've had coworkers in the UK, for example, that just work second shift.
Yeah,
that's perfectly fine.
There was a gentleman I worked with at Cengage Learning when I was there, and he was. I thought he was just worked in town or just worked remote. He was in the Eastern time zone or something because he was always with us. And he mentioned something one day. He's like, "Well, I'm in India, so I can't do that." Or I don't remember what it was like. We were going to go to a happy hour or something like that. And he's like, "Well, I'm actually in India. I can't do." I'm like, "What? You're in India? Are you kidding me? What?" So yes, I'd say that would be proof that work, as long as you work in the same time zone, it can definitely work.
We should all just work UTC. That's the correct answer.
My family gets the whole thing about, because we just did daylight savings time recently, of course, and that argument comes up every time. And every time they say it, and the computer geek in me is like, well, if let's get rid of the daylight savings time, sure. Yes, of course. But if you want to really do it right, just make everybody go to UTC and we'll solve the problem. We don't need time zones. Everybody's on UTC and we're good to go.
Yeah, we always have the joy too. I don't know if you work with a lot of European customers. I'm guessing probably not a ton.
Not a ton of our customers, but I work with people that work for those customers over in different areas. Yeah.
And you get that joyous time that I think we're in right now, or we just missed, where America changes their time zone and Canada changes the time zone, but Europe doesn't.
Yeah,
and that creates all these calendar conflicts that weren't there before.
Oh, and I have one of the weirdest things that I read. One of my colleagues lives in is it Newfoundland, and
they're off by like half an hour.
There was like a half hour thing there, and I'm like, "What are you talking about? It's 8:30 or whatever." I'm like, that doesn't make any sense to me. My brain did not want to compute that. So
India's like that too. They have one time zone for the entire country, but it's half an hour off.
Oh wow!
Because otherwise they'd just split the country in half, and it would be half in one time zone and half the other.
Oh, I see.
But it's only a time zone wide, so it just made more sense to just go on the half hour.
I gotcha. All right, so remote work, we kind of covered a couple things there, ship it or skip it, but I couldn't disagree with you. I loved all that. All right, this one we may not agree on. TypeScript.
Skip it.
Ooh, say more words.
I will completely own the fact that I'm wrong.
I'm gonna be steadfast in my wrongness. Yeah. I love it.
Okay. I spent a long time getting out of Java development to do a lot of JavaScript. Mm-hmm. And one of the things I liked about JavaScript was that the types were loosey-goosey. Mm-hmm. And now TypeScript is making them not loosey-goosey again. Mm-hmm. And so I just sort of fundamentally have a visceral reaction against it. I acknowledge completely that if I come across a existing code base that's poorly tested, that the types are a thing that I can lean on.
Sure.
Like I've done this in Java, where it's like, well, let's make a change and see what breaks. Okay, well, this isn't being used.
Right.
You can't do that in JavaScript. Right. TypeScript will let you do those sorts of things. You can find mistakes. Like comment out this class. Oh yeah, someone is using it. But TypeScript does a mediocre job of this because the types aren't real. Right. They compile away. They transpile away.
Yeah.
And so it's one of those things where I have to know JavaScript in order to be a TypeScript developer. Anyhow. and I've built libraries for TypeScript that are up on or in TypeScript that are up on npm.
Yeah.
And the big thing that I found with TypeScript that I get when I build these in TypeScript is they give me a false sense of security, because I'm assuming that because I have a type, that means I don't have to validate my arguments.
Right.
But I totally do, because some of the people are going to call from JavaScript, and they're not going to get the red squiggles that tell them they're doing it wrong.
Right.
If you're building like just a website and you're not building libraries, I think TypeScript is actually the correct choice, even though I don't like it. Because, I mean, in theory, if you properly test all your code and everything, you should be able to make changes with confidence. But we all know how often projects are consistently and properly tested.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's foolish to rely on that, because you're relying on someone to do the right thing. And any plan that requires humans to do the right thing has a flaw, which is humans.
Yes. Yes.
And so I prefer JavaScript, but I know I'm wrong.
Well, I am not a strong JavaScript. That's not been a language that I excelled at. It's funny because I think I loved Ruby, and I know we mentioned the other day when we were talking, you were a big Ruby fan as well. And I loved Ruby for that loosey goosey. I don't know, maybe I learned it at the right time in my life where I was like, oh, this is refreshing. But I'm not that way about JavaScript. I think I'm such a long time Java guy that that types, and I think it's, for me, it's more about, because a lot of stuff I do now with my role, I don't get to work on teams anymore, but I envision, like, if I was working on a team, like, I don't think I'd want to work on a team in Ruby because of all the loosey goosiness.
Yeah.
One thing that I discovered in Ruby that I always bring up to people is, like, you can change the method or the, what happens on a specific object, not on the class, but on an object.
Mm-hmm.
So you can have, a list of ducks, and you can go down the list and it would go quack, 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 woof. And you're like, wait a minute, why is one duck woofing? Like, how did a dog get,
Yeah.
But you can do it on one object. You shouldn't, but you can. And those are the things that just blow my mind and make me never want to use that language. But I think TypeScript for me, I would have to lean on TypeScript. Otherwise, I'd have to give up saying that I can actually do front end development, because I don't know JavaScript. so I'm going to hold on to it, right? Because I actually do like React and TypeScript with React.
In the case of Ruby, the metaprogramming model was really sophisticated,
Mm-hmm.
and honestly, I think that was a terrible thing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's a lot of Rubyists who love it, and I get why it's fun,
right?
But it lets you write some of the most glorious spaghetti that I've ever seen. Way worse than anything you can do in JavaScript. And JavaScript actually has a lot of metaprogramming things that you can do.
It sure does.
Because classes are a lie.
Mm-hmm.
They're just a fiction that's created by the syntax of the language, and you just have prototypal inheritance, where I just have a hash and I look in the hash, and if it's there, then I use it, and if it's not, I go to the next thing in the chain and the next thing in the chain and go up and up and up and up until I hit the top. And at any point, you can take any of those instances, because there are no classes in JavaScript. There's only instances.
Mm-hmm.
There's a class keyword, but it's not a class.
Right. Not in the sense way that we would think of it from
it's
Java.
A syntactic sugar around a function, which creates an object which has a particular prototype. And then you can modify any of those prototypes in the chain. And so you can have an instance of the thing that you think is an instance, and change the value of it, change a function on it, in the same way you could in Ruby.
Yeah.
Or you could change it on the prototype that is in, I'm air quoting here, the class,
right,
which is really just another object with properties. And so, yeah, you can do some terrible, terrible stuff in JavaScript in the same way that you can do some terrible, terrible stuff in Ruby. But Ruby's got more capabilities there. And you really get to this code where I call it, you got the dry, right? Don't repeat yourself.
Right.
Ruby lets you do things where your code becomes arid, where it's arid really isn't dry. That's what arid stands for. And where it's so dried up that you can't understand what it does anymore. And that's not good. That,
right.
Sure, you've abstracted away everything. And now everything is configuration.
Yeah.
But that now I can't read it.
Right.
You always have to write something down somewhere, right? Right? Before anything's going to happen. It's like, and there's this tendency to over dry your code, and metaprogramming is usually the preferred tool for that. And
nice.
It's that write once code. Yeah.
All right. So we had down here AI chatbots on Ship It or Skip It.
Oh, that's a good one. Ooh, I think skip it.
Okay.
Because they're annoying. Uh,
Yeah.
You go to some website and it's like, it's like Clippy comes up and helps you.
Right.
And
People
everyone
know
hated
who
Clippy
Clippy
too,
is.
right?
Yeah.
I go to a website, I don't want a chatbot to say, hey, you want to ask me about these things here. Whether it's AI or there's a human behind it, I don't care. They're kind of annoying. Also, I think a lot of people are, I think we talked about this the other day. Back in the 90s when the internet was new, everyone had to have a website, but no one knew why.
Right.
And I think now everyone wants to put an AI chatbot on their website, but they don't know why.
Mm-hmm.
And so the reason I say skip it is because I think a lot of people are wasting money on this when they don't need it. That's really and they're annoying.
Yeah, I think the bulk of the ones that we've seen are definitely done poorly. It's like,
Yeah.
I want to do this, and then it says, oh, I understand you want to do these three things, one of these three things. It's like none of those are related to what I'm trying to do here. Like, if I think if done well, that's a big if, right?
Yeah.
If done well, I think it could be great to help, slim down some of our call center, needs and all of that. I get it. Yes. But
Yeah.
I don't know. The experience thus far has been, I don't know, less than stellar. Let's just put it that way. So I'm with you on that. I'm skipping for now until the state of the art becomes a little more compelling.
I will say that if you're doing like some sort of RAG implementation to make your interrogatable documentation, that's my term, not a term of art. That can be very useful. But then that's just using an LLM that's got additional information. And that's like, which is kind of what I do every day with ChatGPT anyhow. And you always need to check that though, because it'll make crap up. And it's like, I feel like the LLMs are like 2-year-olds. If you or a 2 or 3-year-old, you ask like a really little kid questions, and it hasn't occurred to them that they can say they don't know. They just have to provide an answer, and they just start making stuff up. And like when my kids were young, and I do this with kids when I get a chance, as I'll ask them very open-ended questions that don't have really clean answers, and just to see what they say, because it's endlessly amusing, and it's good for them actually because it helps them to think, right?
Yeah. Absolutely.
But yeah, they'll come up with some really funny ideas. It's quite delightful. And but LLMs are kind of doing the same thing, but they sound like adults and they sound really confident.
Yeah, they're very confident in what they're saying, and they're not very forthcoming when they're guessing, right? Like they're not like, I'm going to say this in a very confident way, and it sounds very compelling because I use fancy words and stuff, but I have like 30% confidence that I know what I'm talking about here, but I'm not going to let you know that.
I will do a shameless plug. If you are building a AI chatbot, then Redis is a good candidate for semantic caching.
Okay.
So you can so you can take the query that someone asked and create an embedding off of the query, and then send that to an LLM, the query, not the embedding, and then take the answer you get back and cache it with that embedding. And then you can go in and look into Redis and find out when someone asks a similar question. You can say, well, let's go look in the cache first to see if there's an answer to this question semantically.
So it's almost like a knowledge base kind of a thing. Like
it's literally someone asked this question already, but it's different enough that like normally you would cache off it just like if you're caching like a patient ID, you just look up the patient ID number and then it's like either it's there or it's not, right? But if someone's asking a question of an LLM like, why are my photos blurry?
Yeah.
Then the LLM answers that question, and then you put that answer in the cache in Redis, along with the embedding of that you get out of asking the question, why are my photos blurry? Then when someone comes around and says, why are my pictures out of focus? Then you create embedding and you go look in Redis and say, well, this matches. It's close enough.
Yeah. The embedding.
And then we just
similar.
We return the answer. And now you don't have to hit the LLM. So it's actually a good way to improve performance for one, but also just to reduce cost because LLMs, they ain't cheap.
Yeah, especially if you're, all that generation, and even if you're running it locally, it's going to cost compute and stuff. But if you're, sending tokens over the wire to some of the big guys, you're paying for that. That's cool. That's a neat approach. I hadn't thought of that before.
Yeah, you can put that in front of a RAG implementation as well, of course.
Sure. So. Yeah, I like that. All right, fantastic. So one thing we always like to ask our folks, our guests, is What do you see as the future trends and opportunities in the industry? Kind of that vision. What are you seeing? Coming up here in maybe the distant or not so distant future for our industry.
I mean, it's actually a really unpredictable time right now because this is a sort of a sea change.
Mm,
AI is sort of changed. It is a change on the scope of when the internet happened in the 90s.
hmm
Like I graduated from college in 94. And so perfect time to graduate. Right? Just ride. I've been riding that wave for the last 30 years. It's been great.
hmm
And we're going through another change like that. And there's just, I don't think that we're going to lose programmers. Um, I don't think that job's just going to go away because there's still this thing where you have to, like, the act of programming is actually just creating the detailed specification.
hmm
I need to think of all the permutations. This is why, like, 4GLs always failed, or like those drag and drop programming solutions that we'd always come
mm
up with. It's like, hey, if we just drag and drop, the business people could do it instead. Except that they don't think of all the edge cases and all the conditions and all the permutations you can run into. And I think that in some ways we may end up using, and I'm just spitballing here, um, we may end up is kind of like those tools in a way, except you type at it. It'll generate
Okay.
you a bunch of code, and it's pretty smart. It's a lot smarter than that. But there's still this thing where it's letting me build big chunks, but as a developer, I still need to compose those big chunks, and I need to look at that code and vet it to make sure it's doing an okay job. What we should have added to our skip or ship list is vibe coding,
Okay.
which is total skip. Right? um, because there's going to be a human in the loop, and ultimately it's kind of like IntelliSense on steroids. I betrayed my early Microsoft days by saying IntelliSense as opposed to autocomplete.
And I know exactly what you're talking about
Yeah,
because I
but
was
it
there with you.
but it kind of is that where it's like, well, I can just create the entire class by telling it what the class needs to do. But I'm still someone's got to. It just expands my scope. This is how you actually get 10x developers. You use
hmm
AI. Um, does that mean that we don't need as many developers? Well, I don't know. Maybe we just need more software. These are not mutually exclusive.
Right. Well, that's one
Historically,
thing I
whenever we
see.
had big technical innovation, it just leads to more plenty.
Right. Right.
Um, as opposed to, not as many people farm now, but everyone's fat.
we,
So
we ain't running out of food.
right.
Well, that's kind of where my take was on the AI thing, like, because it's never really been. You don't really hear a lot of software shops that are like, or people, shops that are developing software. They're like, man, what are we going to do with all these developers? Like, I
Yeah.
just don't know what to do with we got developers coming out our ears, right? And so it'd be great if we could actually catch up, and so we could do more and make. I love the way somebody phrased it at a conference I was at. They were like, we can kind of make our humans superhuman, and we can do more with folks. I think for a little while there's going to be that dip, like you're
Yeah.
saying. There may be a little bit of a dip where people are like, "Wait a minute, we can save money." But I think once that light bulb moment comes on, I think it's going to be we're going to be able to do more. We're going to be able
Yeah.
to. So anyway, I'm with you on
Well, I
that.
think a lot of the dip that we're seeing right now here in the United States and in Europe has more to do with the fact that we spent a couple of years proving that remote work totally works, and everyone's like, you're right, we should do that. We should totally open up a shop in Costa Rica and Bulgaria and Poland. And so what's happening is a lot of jobs are shifting. I think that's
Mm-hmm.
more of the impact
Mm-hmm.
because you can pay someone in Costa Rica a lot less, and they can use ChatGPT just as well as I can.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden it's cheaper, right?
Sure.
And while that kind of sucks for developers in the U.S. because the market is it's a little tight right now,
Sure.
um, but as a business, that is the right decision to make. Um, you know, I mean, it sucks for me as an individual, right? But I mean, that's what businesses are for, right?
Mm-hmm.
You need to maximize shareholder value, right? That's their job. They're
Absolutely.
machines that do that, and so. Yeah, but I think that's actually some of what we're seeing with some of the layoffs that we've had over the last 6 months or so.
Mm-hmm.
Is
Absolutely.
I know we have openings in Costa Rica, but
It's
we don't have any
beautiful.
developer openings in the U.S.
beautiful down there too.
Yeah, it's kind of funny actually. I met a couple of the people that are working in the Costa Rican team, and they're both expats. Neither one of them are Costa Rican. So
there's something to be said for that. It's gorgeous down there.
But when we were at Pillar, actually, we talked about opening up a shop down there. Because think about it, you could do like a big retreat, fly everyone down to Costa Rica. There was like some resort for sale on the beach, and we're like, look at the price, like, yeah, we could buy that.
That sounds like a developer center to me. That's what that is.
Yeah, we're gonna do a development center, and then we could bring clients down there and say, we're gonna spend the next 2 weeks pounding out your requirements and figuring out what you want to build, and this is our training center. We're gonna fly everyone to Costa Rica.
Man,
yeah, it was a solid idea. We never did it.
That sounds really cool, man.
We wanted to have a forge in Costa Rica. It would have been glorious. I would have went down there for 6 months to help.
Of course,
take one for the team.
Yes. It's the cross you bear. Yes.
Yeah.
All right. So I know for me, after our conversation, I'm going to absolutely go check out, so tell me your GitHub again. What is your, where can I get some of these cool things?
My GitHub account is Guy Royse, github.com/Guy Royse.
Royce, like the how'd you phrase it earlier?
It's Royce, like Rolls Royce, but without the money.
Okay.
But it's not spelled that way. So hopefully my name's in the title, and you can just look at the title and spell it. But most people spell Royce Royce. I spell it Royse, which has been the bane of my existence because I have to always stress the S when I spell it for people.
I have to spell my name even when I do spell it. So I have to. My name is Carman, Carman. Even when I do spell it to people, they're on autopilot and they type it into computer systems en, and they'll be like, "Well, I don't see your appointment, or I don't have your reservation, or I don't whatever." I'm like, "Okay, you probably just misspelled the name. Put an, and I'll be darned. It's there."
You can also go to guy.dev, and then that should have. I think that has links to my GitHub and stuff. Honestly, if you type Guy Royse into Google and you spell my last name wrong, it will correct you.
Nice.
So
those computers.
For the real nerds out there, it's Romeo Oscar Yankee Sierra Echo. That's how you spell it.
Nice. So,
and I have a joke about someone else's name, but we'll do that after we're done recording.
Yeah, we'll have to do that off mic. You mentioned also that Redis is going to be having the release 8. Is that correct? That's coming out very soon. So that's something that absolutely you should check out. It's coming out in a week or two, maybe even by the time this recording is released. So definitely check that out. All right, we're going to do our lightning round. This is super serious stuff, right? This is the most important segment that we do.
I can tell it's going to be really serious.
This is where we get into the hard hitting, right? The stuff that is very provocative. People are going to be they're thinking differently after this. You know what I mean? Like this is really good stuff. Okay, I'll go through 10 questions, and there are correct answers, so be careful. Number 1, if you were really hungry, would you eat a bug?
Yes. In fact, I almost ate a stink bug once because it was it got in the glass that I was washing my pills down with. So,
oof, that would not be fun. Okay. LA or New York?
Can I say none of the above?
None of the above. Okay. All right. We'll accept that. Yeah.
I guess if I had to choose, I'd probably do, oh God, probably LA if I had to choose because the weather's nicer at least.
Okay. I like that. How do you feel about cranberries?
I love cranberries.
Okay, good.
And the band too.
Yeah, that's true. I didn't even think about that, but that's a good point. They are a good band. What's your favorite car?
Ones with wheels that go round and round.
So you're very specific, is what you're saying. Yeah.
Okay. Actually, I've been kind of thinking about buying a Jeep lately, a Jeep Wrangler. So I think that could be fun.
Nice.
Mostly because I want to trick it out as my ham radio mobile.
So Ocala is horse country where I grew up in Florida. So
Yeah.
it's like you almost took a chunk of Kentucky and dropped it in the middle of Florida. So there were a lot of, I don't know, rednecks, right? Like,
Yeah.
I grew up with people there. They led their CBs and stuff, and they would have these big, huge antenna. So they'd go driving past your house, and all your speakers in your house, if they're not guarded or shielded very well, they'd start
CBs are actually really bad about that in particular.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and
wake you up in the middle of the night,
and the bandwidth, the wavelength and such that you actually have to have a really big antenna to do it effectively.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and they would love that. They would just key it up and wake you up in the middle of the night. Okay, we're on, I think, question 4. This will be the 5th. Sourdough or wheat?
Sourdough.
I'm with you on that. If you could travel back in time, what period of time would you go to?
I think I'd go all the way back to the Stone Age. Just because then I could just be a caveman and just live very hand to mouth, in a sort of a hunter-gatherer, positive sort of way. If I ended up in any other like historical period, like ancient Rome or something like that, I'd probably just get killed. Or enslaved or something like that. And those don't sound like good outcomes.
No, I like that. That's a good answer. Okay. Kind of would be, you could choose to be a loner, and you'd probably have enough, knowledge about the world based on it. Because it's not like you have to go back to being a Stone Age.
Yeah. I don't. It's not like I forget how to make gunpowder.
Right. Exactly.
That's like the science fiction fantasy everyone has in their head. Is like, I'm going to go back in the past, and then I'm going to make gunpowder.
I'm going to be the warlord.
Yeah.
Nate Bargatze had a great bit about that. He's like, I think if I went back in time, I'd see somebody, and I'd be like, hey, one of these days you're going to be able to talk on a phone. You'll be able to just carry a phone in your pocket. And they'd be like, really? How's that? And like, I think I'd be terrible at that because I don't think I could make a difference in the world at all. I wouldn't know.
Yeah. My second choice would be, let's go back to the 70s.
Okay.
And then, because I would know everything to invest in.
Yeah. The Back to the Future thing.
Yeah.
All right. We're at 6, I think. Favorite childhood TV show? When
I was really, really, really little, I liked that cartoon that had Grape Ape in it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's going way, way, way back.
Grape Ape.
Like all the people listening to this is like, Grape Ape, what the hell's that?
Yeah.
Things that I remember watching avidly is I really like the $6 Million Man.
Yeah. That was good.
Especially the episode with Bigfoot. And Bigfoot, fun fact, was played by Andre the Giant in those episodes.
Was it really?
Yeah.
No way. Okay. Now I'm going to have to go watch that. I liked Wonder Woman. That was out at the same time.
Yeah. Well, they did some crossovers too.
Yeah, they sure did.
Didn't they? Or that's
correct.
Or is that the Mandela effect?
Probably. With let's see. Name one of the 7 dwarfs.
Sleepy.
Mm-hmm.
My favorite.
That checks out. I think this may be, is this our second to last? Sour Patch Kids or fresh circus peanuts? This is specific here.
That actually matters a lot. They need to be fresh circus peanuts.
I read it wrong. Stale Sour Patch Kids or fresh circus peanuts?
Oh, that's a no-brainer. Fresh circus peanuts.
Okay.
I would have chose those over fresh Sour Patch Kids.
Okay, fair. All right, and our final question.
Drum roll, please.
Let's see what. Do you know how to salsa dance?
No.
I don't either.
You can dance if you want to.
Leave your friends behind.
That's right.
I picked up what you're putting down there.
Yes, that was what I was putting down.
Okay, good. Yeah, I think
it's possible that we're both Gen Xers. Yeah,
we are. Yeah, I think we were born near the same time for sure. This has been the /. I'm your host, James Carman, and again, thank you to our guest, Guy Royse. You've been a fantastic guest, and can't wait to hear the episode.
Thanks for having me.